Gentlemen, the time has come once again to discuss things. Hi, I'm Sid Part 2, and joining me...
Hey, what's up? I'm that man. I'm a geek for fun. What's up, mates? Fuck.
You stupid... You
Um,
can't even...
I
First
can't.
time,
I
first
can't
episode
even.
on the channel, and you have to say an F-bomb in the first minute. Like, do we... It's a mess. But yes, as you might have been able to tell, I am a geek for fun, and joining me is that Matt kid. And
Yep.
we're taking over for Ian because Ian is currently being the true dad for fun, the true daddy gentleman, and raising a lovely baby with his lovely wife right now. So this, for a couple of weeks to maybe a couple of months, depending, me and Matt are going to run this town, and it's going to be a tight ship. We're going to make sure it's fair and cruel. And the first topic we're talking about is the first ever landmark, and we're already making this show better than Ian, suggested Geeky Gentlemen topic.
Oh my god.
And that is design changes / superhero, I guess, just reinventions in terms of appearance. For examples like Batman changing his different logos every other week. We'll think of a better name when it comes to the title, and oh god, that's my job now. Help. But that's the general premise. And I guess I just want to start, given that was the primary example. Matt, what's your favorite Batman design?
This is gonna get into Trunks discourse real quick.
My
My
hands
favorite.
together menacingly.
My favorite Batman design is kind of a more obscurish one. I really like Morrison era Justice League Batman, where he's got the really dark gray bodysuit, he's got the yellow oval, and he's got the black gloves and the black cape. So it's kind of based off the black suit from like the 89 and Returns, but it's not fully black. It's just a very, very dark gray, and there's still a difference in color between the bodysuit and the gloves. I really like that. Like, I think you still get the iconography of the yellow oval symbol and the yellow belt while not losing the, like, he's supposed to be a big, scary, shadowy person. So that one has just always ticked all the right boxes for me. Outside of that, I actually really like the Rebirth suit. I was kind of sad to see it go, honestly,
Rebirth suit was
because I
pretty
thought that
great.
one was good. Yeah.
I think Capullo
What about
did a great
you?
job with that. For me, it's got to be Neil Adams, Denny O'Neil / Norman Brayfogle, blue Batman, yellow oval, grey bodysuit, but it's like a dark. Like, people always go so light with the grey. I'm with you. I think Batman should be a dark grey, but I like it with the blue as well. I think it's such a great color contrast, and the way I heard someone explaining it to me is the reason why it looks like that and it's so good is, if you ever listen to the channel Gaijin Goomba, he explains,
Yes.
real ninjas wear blue.
Real ninjas wear blue.
Real
Yes.
ninjas wear blue because the sky isn't black at night. It's shades of blue, and the Batman symbol is the yellow of the moon, the blues of the skies, and the greys of the clouds. It is the night of Gotham come to life. And ever since someone said that to me, I was just like, oh my god, this clicks so well. He's not trying to look like he's a vigilante or something. He's trying to look like he's mythic, like he is a bat demon. And demons are known for some splashes of color now and again. They're not all straight.
Sure.
By and again. So that one I really like, but I'm also a big fan of the GLA one like you. And what I think is interesting is all our favorite looks that we've said are so different to Golden Age Batman.
Yeah. Oh, for sure. For sure.
Like, that's the thing that really stands out to me is you start out with like kind of like the devil-ish ears with the cape that's more like a glider attached to his shoulders than it is an actual cloak. You got the purple gloves, of course, which nowadays looks cool on Zero Year, but it's hard to imagine a Batman who fights the Joker ever wearing something purple, which is one of the only downsides of the Rebirth suit. They had that little bit of purple on the cape. But it's so strange how that has happened over time. And we never really go back to Golden Age Batman unless we're doing like an old school take, because it does look so radically different. But at the same time, you see people like Spider-Man, and Spider-Man's had tweaks now and again. But by and large, you see what Ditko put in Amazing Fantasy 15 / Kirby, and then you see what is being put out today, and people be like, "Oh yeah, that's the same, exact same." People, to a non-comic fan, they'd think it's the exact same costume.
Well, I mean, like, there's something to consider there. I've always thought, because I think the same is true of like Captain America basically looks the same. Like, he's had some minor tweaks here and there, and like obviously like Ultimate Captain America and MCU Captain America have like tweaked the suit, but like by and large his suit has pretty much remained the same. And I wonder if part of it is because like yeah, Batman's look has changed, but that's because he was first appeared back in like the 40s, whereas you had a whole couple decades of varying different comics before Spider-Man came out. And so by the time Spider-Man comes out, like it's almost like there's kind of someone has already kind of blazed the trail, so it's kind of easier to, I don't know if maybe that helped come up with a look that stuck better, because it was, he didn't appear until the 60s, whereas Batman, Superman, they're all way early. They're way in the 40s. So I wonder if that helped Marvel at all, in the sense that they could kind of look at the history of comic book superheroes that had come before them, and help Stan Lee and all the people creating the actual looks of these. And I wonder if that in any way helped them kind of guide their hand to create something that would be kind of like get it right the first time. You know what I'm saying? I don't know, because I mean, that's so true. Like the first time you do something, the first time something comes out, it's always going to get tweaked. I mean, the Batman suit is just not the same suit that it was back then. There's most of the elements of the same thing. Same with the Superman suit. Most of the elements are by and large the same, but there were certain things that needed to just kind of be updated and tweaked to really get it to like the peak pinnacle of what that suit could be. Whereas like Spider-Man and Captain America, they never really needed that, but they also came out 2 decades later, so they had that foresight. Or that,
I mean, that's the interesting thing about Cap, is Cap was pretty close.
Well, that's true. Cap's pretty close. That's a good point too. Cap,
but
even
right
Cap, time.
You could probably say Cap's had an even more drastic change than Superman or Batman with his shield, as looks completely different.
He doesn't do he always does the round shield now, and the design on it is way different than it used to be. And I guess kind of what we're trying to get at the heart at is what causes these changes, without just saying, oh well, people got better at art and we just our taste of all.
Like what's the motivation?
Actually, yeah.
And I think the biggest example I can kind of point to in terms of a story reason and just like creators touching things, and the one that's the most noticeable, and I think the one you can see happen in a short amount of time but still see that gradual change, is the move from Ditko Spider-Man to Romita Spider-Man. And how, less so how Spider-Man's drawn, but more so how Peter Parker's drawn, is where we made Peter Parker handsome. He was never a bad looking guy, but he was always just kind of like average, right? And then Romita comes on the book and everyone looks like they're supermodels. Except for Harry Osborn, like who knows what's going on with that. But you've got that happen, and it started out as Romita on the book, bit by bit, aping Ditko, and then slowly morphing to his more romance comic style, and while Ditko comes from horror comics. So you can get that like stylistic choice, but also that came more as a point where Peter was aging up. He was out of high school, he was just starting college, Romita kind of built him up through those and we were kind of getting we'd done the If This Be My Destiny. We'd made Peter a man, spiritually speaking, right? We'd done his hero's journey. So now it was time for him to deal with the things of a man. It's like, oh, suddenly now he's noticing the girls. So Ramita comes on. It almost feels like, yeah, Ramita is the only one who could have drawn Mary Jane when she did that Face It Tiger, you just hit the jackpot. Because no one else would have, like, you can't, like, Ditko drew beautiful women, but, like, Ramita is like kind of the king of that. So it's he defined that character for a generation. The fact that Mary Jane is such like she's all about the vibe she gives off. Like that's what Spectacular captures so well is she's always got that confidence. And I think that's important with character design and why they change is a good character design will tell you about the character. And as we've moved forward, as we've crafted these characters more, I feel like we've also got more of that. Do you have any examples you can think of that? Because I've got a couple, but I'm curious to see where you would stand on character design that you can tell that element is because this character is like this.
Well, I think you see it a lot when you are comparing kind of the very classic version of the character to something that is in particular trying to say something else about that character. So like the one, if we're kind of talking about if we're talking about like Spider-Man, right? So like a great example of that is classic Gwen Stacy versus Ultimate Gwen Stacy, and how those are the same characters but drawn entirely different ways because they're trying to give off such a different vibe. Now that's not a character changing over their lifespan. That's taking an existing character, taking them in a purposefully new direction, and realizing that their classic design doesn't even remotely work for that. So that would be kind of an example where these characters become so tied to how they're drawn that in order to really get away from that, you end up having to draw them in entirely different ways if you're wanting to approach them differently. In terms of characters who have evolved and changed as they've grown up in their own main continuity and kind of changed, I don't know, what is one of the examples you're thinking of?
The biggest one I can think of is when we've moved from Batman having the like capsule utility belt to the big pouches, and also a kind of a sooner one is Batman moving from the over the shoulders cape when we first see him debut to the almost like the next issue to the covers his entire body cloak. And what I say informs that is because that's directly you know Batman he needs gadgets. He's got a utility belt that he is not just there for show, it's got a function. And I think that's what as much as I do like the capsules, it does look a little bit like when it's drawn in a 2D image, it's easy to think of it as like decorative. But when he's got the heavy Jim Lee pouch, you can see, he's got stuff in that. He needs to carry stuff. He needs tech. And especially if you juxtapose, like the reason why Batman looks the way he does is because Superman looks the way he does. And he's almost like, click, invert the color palette, right? Like it's just like, not in literal sense, but like in the terms of, Superman doesn't wear gloves because Superman doesn't need them. Batman wears gloves because Batman needs them.
Well, that's gonna be a big, I mean, that's a step towards kind of what I think is going to be a main driving factor, especially as you get to like the 80s, 90s, and especially 2000s, which is that realism factor, right? There's that idea that we as nerds want to take these characters in this mythology very seriously. And so if we're trying to do that and we're sitting here and we're saying, okay, I want to tell this super serious Batman story that could really, it makes it very easy to suspend your disbelief and see this happening in the real world. Well, Batman's a vigilante who goes out at night and beats up dudes in the shadows. So why is he wearing like fucking bright blue? And like, obviously in your explanation of it, it makes a lot of sense. But, if you're just kind of casually reading it, it makes sense that these things don't always click in your mind. So slowly we see these changes made for the sake of realism. Let's add more armor. Let's add more things that just, so we go from like, let's just make it, these are just comics, these are just costumes, to where it gets really huge, bold, bright, and colorful and iconic. And then it slowly gets back to, well, let's let's bring it down and let's see what would happen if we make it realistic. And with Batman, that kind of works because Batman is just a human. But then you have characters like Superman who you try to armor them up and kind of fit into this grittier tone you're trying to create, and it just goes against the character. Like, why does Superman need any armor on his bodysuit? So sometimes these changes just get made almost arbitrarily because you're just trying to fit them into a style that's kind of in vogue right now.
And I think that's almost really funny, right? Because the Superman example you mentioned goes against the mission statement, right? The classic suit is more realistic than the New 52 suit because of that exact thing that pops into your head. Why does Batman wear blue? He's meant to be stealthy. Why does Superman wear armor? He's meant to be invincible. Like, that is a in a more superficial world where it's like, well, it doesn't matter what Superman wears. Give him armor. But if you are looking at it realistically, you're like, it doesn't have to be armor. Like, that I think is so funny is when people confuse realism with like grit and dark all the time. The most realistic Spider-Man costume is how Alex Ross draws him, where it's literally a cotton suit. Because that's what he would build, right? That's what he would have. That's the materials. He'd look like a cosplayer. The moment they ever get brave enough to put that on screen, I'll be a happy man. But like that's what Spider-Man would look like. Is he would look like he's in a spandex suit. He wouldn't look necessarily the coolest. He'd look kind of creepy, which is meant to be the vibe he gives off. The same thing, I think, goes almost hand in hand in the other. Okay, that's fantastical. Let's look at the why Superman wears the costume he does. The reason why Superman doesn't wear a mask. Obviously, I don't think this was intended. It could have been. Siegel and Schuster were smart kids. But the reason why Superman doesn't wear a mask is because he's designed to look bright and colourful and reassuring. Don't be afraid of me. I'm the silly man in the costume that you recognize. I've got the underwear on my outside. It's okay. I'm here to help. Ah, he's all right. New 52, looking like he's from Cybertron, coming down in glowing red eyes. Like, holy crap. Yeah, everyone's going to be frightened of this guy. No wonder everyone thinks he's going to turn evil. Like, part of why, and I think the same could be said for, like, Wonder Woman, is Wonder Woman picks a costume that, when she made that more armored, is more realistic and feels more true to herself. But you also don't need to ditch the colors because she wants to look as non-threatening as possible. She's not here to frighten. That's something I think should be considered. I am all for more realistic and more thought being put into superhero costumes. But so many people and so many artists get realism mixed up with grunge and line work everywhere.
Yeah, you have to find that balance. Like, if you want to do a superhero suit that gives you that that sense of realism, because I mean, for some people that is, it's not like I want to sit here and like crap on people who like hate everything bright and colorful in the comic book. Like, I get on some level that you're trying to read this story about vigilantes fighting crime, and it's weird to you that they're all wearing like bright spandex and going out and fighting dudes with guns. Like, I get that has the potential to be immersion breaking for some people. It's why you've got to find that line where you're able to convey something that feels real enough that you can suspend that disbelief, but that doesn't just lose part of what makes the character or lose the iconography. And of course, you don't always need to do that. I mean, even in Batman Earth 1, they make a point to not make his suit look armored because that's part of his whole mantra in that book. So I think really, as comics have matured as a medium, they've gotten more popular. So more and more people are reading them. More and more people want to have them be taken seriously. And so I think there's just been this push for that more realistic, down-to-earth design, which seemingly correlates to let's armor everything up and make everything, look gritty in some way.
And I think that's interesting because on your popular point, I think Because that's kind of what happened in the comics. That's what happened when you let Jim Lee design everyone, right? All the
Yeah.
Justice League end up with collars for some reason. Even Wonder Woman, who doesn't have a neckline, has a collar. It's like they go out of their way to give everyone the Justice League a collar. When Aquaman and Superman's suit look the same, you've got a problem. And I think
Yep.
that's an issue with the comics. When that popular thing gets into it, when we start moving into adaptions and design changes for adaptions, I think is interesting because say we've got, I think a good example, because this is the one time I can actually think of comic book suit and movie reinterpretation of it being on the same film and both looking good is Captain America: The First Avenger.
Yeah.
Is Captain America: The First Avenger gives you Chris Evans in the classic Captain America costume. No ifs and buts about it. No winking to the camera. That's it, right? But they're also like, here it is. Now do you understand why we didn't go with this for the war scenes?
Yep.
Because it just wouldn't have worked. They did it honestly, and like they built the suit. They had him in it. They screen tested it, and they were just like, yeah, no, this just doesn't fly. We even put a jacket on it and let him go out in like a commando version of it, and that looks cool. But it also just isn't the suit straight up because it just wouldn't have looked as good on film. So you get the reinterpretation of the first Avenger costume, which they've taken a while to get Cap's suit right. I think they've found a good balance now with Endgame with finally getting the scale mail back in it. But I think that's a key example of just showing how much thought, because these filmmakers and costume makers are extremely talented. Like you will look at the behind the scenes things. None of these guys just whip this thing out. Like sometimes you look at a costume like they just whip that thing out, but you see the work that gets into making it and doing cosplay. I'm like, no, I get it. Someone genuinely did have to think about this and make reasonings like, okay, why does this work? Why does this work? Why does this work? So I think that's probably a key thing to this argument as well, is this is where you've got artists outside of comic book world looking at superhero costumes and then reinterpreting them. No, it's like drastically in some cases, fine in some other cases. What do you think about? Do you have any standout examples or things you've seen that have gone like drastically in the wrong direction?
The Captain America suit's a good example because the actual suit that they use for the war sequences, it's basically the ultimate suit, you know? It's basically ultimate Captain America, but with this like flight suit aesthetic. And I think that's a really good look. One of the ones that's springing to mind for me, you take Marvel's first family, right? You take Marvel's first family, you take the Fantastic Four. These guys are by their nature bright and wacky and colorful. They deal with crazy, silly, out there science fiction. And then in Fan Four Stick, you give them these like dark black, body suits because you're going for this gritty, realistic vibe. And I'm like, you've completely missed the mark on what you should even be going for here. And so that's a great example of we want to adapt a certain costume, but we look at it and we just go, oh, that's kind of silly. That doesn't fit for what we're doing. It's like, well, you're not really doing the Fantastic Four then, are you? So the only things so the ones that are coming to mind are things like that, where they adapt something and they just completely miss the mark of what it even is that they're adapting, to the point where, yeah, the suit's not how that character should look, but it's not even really that character or that franchise anyways, so I'm not going to get that upset about it because clearly no one did their homework. That would be an example I would think of. I'm trying to think of examples where it's not an adaptation, where someone in comics, because I think I kind of want to look at just costumes as they've evolved in comics, where like we've taken a wrong turn somewhere. Like the Nightwing in red, for example. Like putting Nightwing in red felt like a wrong turn for me. Now I'm not gonna act like I'm the world's biggest Dick Grayson fan, but that's an example
I'll make
where
you.
we took a look. We took a look. We evolved it to the next stage of its evolution, and then everyone collectively looked at it and was just like, oh, okay, I think we kind of fucked that one up. And then we brought it back. That's one that springs to mind. Even Tim Drake's second suit, I don't think is as good as his first suit. And
Oh,
so we did a
interesting.
rebirth. We did a rebirth Tim Drake suit that I thought was really good, where he had the like he went back to having the green and stuff like that. Um, like the second suit's fine, but I don't think it pops, or I don't think it looks as good as the first suit. So there are definitely examples where we go in a step. Some people like it, some people don't. And then there's a noticeable, okay, let's backtrack and let's go back to square one and maybe try something different. And so that happens in comics a lot, right? Where we come up with a new suit design, we say, fuck, and then we try it again. That happened with Superman. You
Oh
go from
yeah.
New 52 Superman to the like
Blue
not
boots,
rebirth super.
footy
Yeah,
pajamas.
yeah. And then we're like, okay, wait, hang on, let's go back to the drawing board. Let's try that one more time. And then we get the really good Superman suit with the red belt that I
But
really like.
because we've done it 3 times previously, everyone's just so sick of it at this point. They're just like, put him in put him in the regular suit. Stop fucking with it at this point. Like, I do stand by if the I prefer the trunks, but I think if the New 52 had started with what the suit we got just before the trunks came back with the bout with the yellow buckle, that would have stayed forever. I don't think the trunks would have come back. I think that would have just been, everyone would have been just happy with it. It's just because the previous two suits leading up to it sucked so badly. Everyone just had a bad taste in their mouths. And I think that's interesting as well, as when you do get a good design, but people are so sick of the bad designs that they're just like, go to the most iconic one, because it's a reset. It's a reset back to zero. One thing I do want to talk about though, just because you brought it up, and I like getting into this with you, is, you know how we were talking about like character informing the costume. That's why I like green on my Robin costumes too. But that's why I think Tim Drake's second one fits him more, because he's the Robin that's the most like Bruce, and his costume is just Bruce's year one costume, but red and black. And I think that's such a cool look for him as like the Robin who's basically just Bruce. That he would pick that choice, and it makes because the Robin suit is so tough to deal with, because everyone kind of blends in with each other. You want to make them look a bit more distinct. So I think if we are having so many Robins, I'm down to just say, all right, Tim Drake's suit is fantastic, but we can just give that as an update. It's just an updated version of Dick. We hadn't even figured out Tim Drake when we designed that. We put Tim Drake in that suit, and we just let Neil Adams design it. Once we've got, once we've got that, we can just retroactively apply that to Dick, as it has been with Teen Titans and DCAU. And we've also give Jason the red and black suit, and that looks good on him as well. So it's like, I think that's an interesting thing, is that we keep swapping costumes sometimes. Like Dick and Bruce, when they were both Batman, Dick was basically just wearing the year one costume.
Yeah. Are you still there?
Yeah.
No.
I was just thinking about, like, that's one of the things where we've got characters informing costumes. We've also got editorial enforcing what characters should wear those costumes. And sometimes costumes like that can have a vibe to them, right? Or be associated with something that people want it gone because of that. New 52 Superman suit we've ragged on a lot, but I think that's a good example of people associate the New 52 with that suit. This is everything wrong with the New 52's costume design. Another thing which I'm sad has happened, but seems to be happened, is Harley Quinn's classic suit has become associated with her relationship with Joker. So because we're ditching her being with the Joker, we're ditching her classic suit.
Yeah. That has definitely been sad. And that's what I've been liking about like the Harley Quinn show, is that we're sticking with her classic color scheme, even though we're not doing the classic suit anymore. And a lot of stuff has done that, not just the show. Obviously in the comics, that's kind of been the case. Like, we're keeping her classic color scheme because that's iconic and that's what people know, but we're not doing the actual full-on jester suit anymore. And it's one of those things where I'm like, I get that you're trying to communicate that Harley has moved past being with the Joker. And I think Birds of Prey kind of does this to some degree, right? Because in Birds of Prey, in the movie, she doesn't have anything resembling her suit, because that is literally like 24 hours of breaking up with the Joker. So I could see in that sort of story, she's not going to put on anything red and black. But you just haven't found anything that looks as good, even if you can logic it out from a character place. So there has to be a balance there where you're finding, because I don't think Harley has gotten a costume that has worked as well as her original costume. And we've tried a bunch of them, and none of them have stuck as well as the original suit because it's just so good.
It's just instantly iconic. It's part of why she became so popular, is that character design. Everything about, like, you could, like, we can still keep the personality, and we've kept like her accent is probably the other biggest thing, but the suit and the color scheme and the diamonds is the thing you see all over people's bags and like Hot Topic and stuff. That's the thing people want to buy. That's her S shield. You can redesign Superman all you want, but even though they've been so drastic, every single time they've realized, no, we got to keep the big giant S on his chest, and we've just got to justify what that means, right? So that's how you get the hope thing. Is people justifying why Superman got an S on his chest. That's very silly. And that's one of those things I kind of got into this with someone on Twitter. It's just like, I don't like the S meaning hope. It's just an S. And I'm like, yeah, but slapping an S on his chest for Super isn't something Clark Kent would do. No. That's an arrogant move. You have to find another reasoning for what it is. And it already doesn't. It already so stylized that we've taken it to that point. And making it a sigil gives it that extra oomph. And that can mean that if you wear a shirt with that on, it's got a symbol now. It's got a meaning to it. So I think
how many comic book stories have done that? How many comic book stories have done that where someone's wearing a Superman T-shirt and that becomes like a thing? Like I just read Superman Clashes the Klan, and how the little girl in that story gets the jacket that's made out of Superman's hoodie. Like the symbol is so iconic that other characters wearing it just kind of means something in and of itself thematically.
And it leans into the power of that through character design. So that's something I think is interesting. Like, it's strictly speaking with comics, because this is something they've kind of really shot off with, and it's probably why they've become so popular in large part, is the logos. How do you feel about superhero logos? Is there ever a point where you feel like a character doesn't need one, or is it just like, if they don't have one, it's weird? Or are there any times you're like, this character shouldn't be wearing a logo on their chest? Like, how do you feel about superhero, like the crest, the emblem of the House of L?
Well, it depends. I mean, like, I really like Batman, for example. I love that they make a point, like, and this is in so many different forms of Batman media. He wears that huge giant symbol because he is not only trying to be a symbol, but they even usually give it a practical element to it. Like the symbol is supposed to be a target. It's supposed to draw your eye to it. Because if you're aiming at the symbol, you're not aiming at his head. So if you aim at the symbol, that's where he's the most protected. That is like the thing that's protecting him. So I always kind of liked that idea that we take a character who's supposed to be this night stalker, but he has this big yellow oval symbol that would be really bright. Well, yeah, that's the point. It's supposed to be bright. It's supposed to be visible. So I actually really like that when they can make the symbol not only part of the iconography, but they can make it mean something. But then there's other characters like I'm a big Green Arrow fan. Green Arrow doesn't need a symbol. He doesn't have one. He's never needed one because just he looks like Robin Hood, and you get it. That's the only iconography he's trying to evoke is Robin Hood. And so as long as he evokes Robin Hood, you're good. Same thing with Black Canary. I mean, Black Canary, they've tried a bunch of different costumes for her, even some back in the day that had different kind of like emblems and things like that. Nothing has ever stuck, just like the black bodysuit with the fishnets and the leather jacket, because that's Dinah. That's what she wears. She doesn't need a logo. The Question, one of my absolute favorite superheroes. He's not even really a superhero. He's a fucking like investigative journalist. So he wears what an investigative journalist wears,
right?
Even when he's fighting crime. And his only symbol is that he doesn't have a face, and it's great. It's brilliant. I love it. So I think I'm struggling to think of any superheroes that have a symbol that don't need one. Like Midnighter maybe doesn't need a symbol. As much as a Midnighter fan as I am, maybe he doesn't need the weird little like kind of a ripoff of Moon Knight, like moon thing. Like he probably doesn't need a symbol. But like Dick Grayson does, like if Dick Grayson is Nightwing, that big, like, and I personally prefer it when it's more clear that it's a bird, where it's actually got like the little, like,
Oh
what
yeah,
would be.
when it's
Yeah, I
just like a
prefer that.
V, it doesn't really make sense.
Yeah, exactly. So like there are some characters like that I'm just like, yeah, I mean, like Midnighter doesn't need a symbol. Apollo definitely does because he's motherfucking Apollo, but I mean he doesn't. He just has kind of like a, you know, but yeah, I can't really. I'm struggling to think of superheroes that I look at and I'm just like, you don't need a symbol. Um, because I think for the most part we've kind of worked that out to a degree. Um, at least that's. I'm struggling. Can you think of any?
I mean, the only one I can think of, and I don't agree with it, but it's the one I feel like is probably the most. Why is that there? Is Daredevil?
Oh, yeah, like the two D's that you can sometimes barely see.
Like, Daredevil probably has the silliest logo out of everyone. I love it because Matt Murdock is the one character you can kind of justify anything in because he's the king of bad decisions. But like, why? First of all, he's blind, so how did that happen?
Mhm.
Second of all, it's two D's together because he's called Daredevil. Like Superman, they've worked so hard to justify why he has a giant S on his chest. It's not like a symbol for hell. It's just two letters. Like it's so goofy. Like, but I love it. Daredevil's costume is so interesting to me because it's simultaneously one of the best ever and one of the worst ever. I don't know how. It's such a weird spot. It shouldn't work. It's all one color.
Yep.
And it's got no cape or anything. You can't even see his eyes. Like everything is just flat. But for some reason, it looks so good and so sleek, and it doesn't inform anything about why Matt would wear this, except he's the king of bad decisions. Like that's what you just need to look at this guy and think, oh, this guy's gonna get himself killed. That's the only thing you need from Daredevil's costume. So that's interesting, but it's also why I feel like you get stuff like the Frank Miller like bandana over their face, black bodysuit that's really come into prominence since the Netflix show, and there's been in the comics recently now as well, where that's kind of people kind of pick that as like, okay, if we're gonna do a realistic Daredevil, this also looks good and kind of has its own iconic feel. It's kind of got that Zorro vibe to it, but like even more, just like you can't even see the eyes. So that's an interesting one where you have something so radically different, but also feels like the character, and some people prefer it. Another key example: so Spider-Man's black suit,
Yep.
completely different, but I almost like it more than the regular one sometimes, depending on what day you catch me on.
Yeah, I feel that. hmm Well, and you know, I'm a sucker for that suits that have that sharp contrast, because with Spider-Man it's so sleek, right? It's just straight black, huge white eyes, huge white symbol, that's it. And that's like just, ooh, that simplicity nails it. It's why I can't stand when we try to add shit to Terry's suit. Like the Batman Beyond suit is perfect.
Oh, for sure.
Stop it. Stop adding red to it. Just stop. Because there was a point in the comics where, like, if you want to make the eyes red, like, whatever, fine, I don't care. But, like, he also had, like, just red, like, tech lines going all over him and shit. And I'm like, you're killing me right now, man. Like, you're taking that amazing suit design, you're flushing it down the toilet. It's why the Cassandra Cain Batgirl suit looks so good. Because it knows exactly what it's trying to be, and it just nails it. Because there's something to be said for a suit that, like, you get that idea and you're just like, boom, that's it, perfect. So like, are there suits like that where like over time we've kind of gone through a couple different things and then we hit on something and we're just like, yes, that's it.
Biggest
That's the look.
example is Nightwing going from disco color to the black and blue sleekness. The moment that comic came out and Nightwing had that design on that cover that you see everywhere, people with the long hair and the mask that's kind of pointed, is we've had variations on it, but we've never gone back to disco Nightwing, and it's got its own certain charm.
Yeah, I don't hate Disco Nightwing.
But it is just kind of like, whoa. the jump from that's kind of goofy for Robin to have, but it fit. He's a circus guy, I can buy it. And then just like, oh fuck, this guy looks great. Like to wear Nightwing as in that costume is what made Dick Grayson the heartthrob of millions across the world. Is what made him probably the most male sexualized character. Is he just had that costume that the accentuation of every single thing with just that silhouette. It's almost why you see. Is that the key? Is that why Daredevil gets so many girls? Is that why Black Cat prefers the black suit? Is there just something about just the silhouette of a man, but nothing else? Is this the key? Thoughts to consider.
Yeah. Well, I mean, and Nightwing's a really cool example, right? Because he goes from Disco Wing to there's that, and you've probably actually read stuff with this in it.
It's a Nightfall.
Again, yeah, I'm so fucking. But yeah, he's got that suit that's in between Disco Wing and the what we know as the Nightwing suit now, where it doesn't have the huge disco collar, but he still has the yellow over the big yellow V. And that's a really interesting where it's like, okay, we're almost there. Okay, you ditch the collar, you got the longer hair, you've got the like V shape. Like you're on it. You're so close. You're right on the cusp of it. And then they just tweak it that further bit to go, okay, black, blue, that's it. Cut the yellow. And then it's perfect. And I actually kind of like that like middle costume. I think it's kind of visually interesting. But that's a really great example of a suit that you can just look at it and you can just see the evolution. And that's a really cool thing to go back and see, because you're exactly right. That's just, let's figure out how to make this work. And then they finally hit on what worked.
Mm-hmm. And that I think is curious, because so much of that suit is also because it's silhouette. And I think I want to talk about this with you as well, because I think it does apply to the idea of character design. Is that suit is also very dependent on how Nightwing is drawn with a acrobat's body. You never see Frank Miller Nightwing. Like, it would just look wrong. It just wouldn't work with that costume. That character design only really works with him being that sleek person who can flip with the air with grace, and you can buy it, kind of Grace son. How do you feel about the evolution of how we've been drawing superhero body types?
Yeah, I mean, that is hitting on kind of a hot button issue, right? I mean, the diversity of body types in superhero media.
Mm-hmm.
And, with the Bat family, it makes sense that everyone's going to be super fucking chiseled and hardcore. With some characters like Superman, like, why does Superman need to be jacked beyond all fucking measurements? Like, he just has super strength from being on this planet.
He gets it from the sun.
He gets it from the sun. He could just be like fucking average Joe Schmo with a beer belly and still be knocking, fucking Mongol into the next solar system. But because he's the alpha, he's the superhero, he's kind of what we have to idealize. So he's got that super idealized physique, even though he doesn't really need it. So I mean, there's still a character reason for him to look like that, because it plays into that like strong man archetype. But then you look at characters where it's just like, okay, the Flash, for example, his power is that he runs super fast. He has a super intense metabolism. He has to eat constantly because he's constantly burning up his food. So there's a reason why it looks weird when Flash is like super mega buffed out.
Yeah,
and
Barry
why
Allen runs into that so much.
Yeah.
For some reason, they just jack Barry up beyond belief.
Yeah, and it just doesn't. I don't like it. I don't like it for the same reason, and this could just be because I grew up reading what I grew up. It could just be I don't like it for the same reason I don't like super mega buff jacked Spider-Man. Like, I prefer a leaner Spider-Man, because Spider-Man kind of has that in common with Dick Grayson, whereas when I think of him moving, because you can kind of picture different superheroes and how they move. When I picture Spider-Man moving, I picture him moving like Dick Grayson, like a gymnast, like someone who's hopping around and going crazy. That type of person does not have the body of like a big, beefy, brawler type. So there are certain characters where, when drawn in a way that gives them that super huge, bulky body, it just doesn't even really feel like the character to me anymore, because it's so at odds with how I imagine their movement and how I imagine their mannerisms and things like that. And so Flash and Spider-Man are, for me, good examples of characters who sometimes get drawn super beefy, and it just it doesn't click for me. It just doesn't work.
Mm-hmm. And one thing I think is, for me, with that, and like terms of like a character's physique, when this character's design is only their physique, so it being changed is sometimes the most noticeable thing, and that's the Hulk. When the Hulk looks like his abs are chiseled and you can see every single muscle, I'm just like, no.
Yeah.
Jack Kirby drew him with a bit of a gut, he's built like a gorilla. The Hulk is a monster. He's a Frankenstein. He's got that huge facial brow, and they've brought that back now with Immortal Hulk. But for a good long while there, when they were trying to lighten up the Hulk and superheroify him, the Hulk was just chiseled. The Hulk looked like he was just a green bodybuilder, which he was played by one, so I guess that leaped over. But like, those are examples where I feel like, no, you make him bigger, you make him thin. I don't like a Wolverine who's super chiseled. I think Wolverine, for his height and his weight, should be a little heavier set. He's a bruiser. He's a drink. He drink constantly. Wolverine doesn't watch his gut. You say one thing about it, will pop a claw in your face. Like, I think Wolverine would be a great example of, actually, in terms of like body positivity. That's the first character I go to in terms of big, that I think you wouldn't even really bat an eye to, especially when you draw him correctly, where he's not Hugh Jackman height.
Well, and that's exactly what I was gonna say. Like, how much of that is influenced by the fact that Hugh Jackman played him, right? Because even in X-Men 1, if you look at Hugh Jackman in the beginning of X-Men 1, he is not as chiseled as he gets later in the franchise. And Hugh Jackman and like, yeah, Wolverine's a short dude with, not super chiseled abs, and he's also hairy as all hell. Like, he should be covered in body hair. And Hugh Jackman in those movies just is not. Now, Hugh Jackman, I still think, delivers a stellar performance, especially in Logan. And I wouldn't lose him, or change that he got cast. But that's an example of, we're kind of starting to stray from what this character was when they were first introduced. And now I'm kind of worried that how are we even going to get back to this original character? Because you're absolutely right. If you have a character who lives and acts like Logan does, he's like, I can't die, or at least it's going to be very hard for me to die. I like beer. I don't give a shit. Like, he's going to look like that. And I'm not saying he's got to be full, like, giant, super mega, he doesn't have to be like fucking the Blob or something. But yeah, not every superhero has to have that like chiseled 6-pack of abs, especially if it doesn't make sense for them. I mean, again, Wolverine has an adamantium skeleton and can heal from any injury. Why does he need to be chiseled beyond all belief?
He's literally big boned.
Yeah, exactly.
That's one of those things which I'm like, and that's what I think from a character standpoint as well, gives that a more interesting dynamic. If, like, say, Cyclops is that model. Cyclops, super self-conscious, super insecure. He would. I feel like that's not to say anything about that, but I feel like Cyclops' character is like, oh, I gotta look great. I've got to be peak physical performance. I need to be the best I can be. And then like Jean goes for that, but then some days she's kind of like, I don't like that Cyclops waxes constantly. And then there's that big, hairy, beefy man with the dad bod. And I'm kind of into that one night. That I feel like's real, man. That comes to like actual how human beings think, and not how media wants to portray human beings thinking in terms of like what people want. I think the same could be said. Moving on to talk about like the guy version of this. I think the biggest problem again is how superhero females are portrayed, especially in terms of like
Oh,
bust size and everything. Like
yeah.
it's ridiculous that we're still. It's gotten better, but it's still far from perfect.
Can I go on a small rant
Oh,
since we're on X-Men
please
real
do,
quick?
please do.
Okay. One of my favorite characters in X-Men continuity is Laura Kinney. And just fuck. Jesus fuck. So like X-23 is introduced in X-Men Evolution. I love X-Men Evolution. It's like my favorite fucking thing. You look at her and you're just like, yeah, that looks like a female Logan. Like she's got like a slightly broader jaw. She's got like a face that's a little bit like, I guess, vaguely more like masculine. Like she's still, an attractive woman, but she's like, you can see that she is clearly made from Logan's DNA. Like you can tell. And then you get to like the X-23 solo comics and just what the fuck happened? She's this like super hot, basically like looks like a fucking supermodel, has like the immaculate, cute jaw. She's wearing like the shirts that are showing off her stomach, and she's got like a bigger bust than she had when she was first introduced. And you're just like, the fuck happened? This is a clone of Logan. How? And so like you took a character whose whole entire origin should preclude them from looking like the typical comic book female, and then you somehow still make her look like the typical comic book female character. And I'm just like, well, at that point, the fuck? Like, I don't understand why we even bother then.
That's such a good example, man. I didn't even know that, and while you were talking, I just looked it up. That is
I
insane.
know, it
That is
pisses me off.
insane.
And then,
That is
like,
such a good, yeah.
Oh, it pisses me off because I love X-23, and then they just fucked her. And I'm like, there are good X-23 stories, and like when she's Wolverine, like that stuff's all pretty good. But like, man, just
Uh-huh.
especially when you compare it to what she looked like in X-Men Evolution, and I'm just like, that's what Laura Kinney looks like. She looks like that, and I'm also totally fine with how Logan did her. But yeah, certain characters where I'm just like, of all the characters to make a hot, sexy anime waifu, this is not the one to do it with. Like, she is scary and large. She's muscular. She doesn't have like a huge chest. Like I just, why would you take a character that gives you the opportunity to so naturally show a different body type in comics and then just force her into the mold of every other? I mean, that's why, like, I think Gal Gadot does a fine job as Wonder Woman. But I do get why people wanted like a more beefed out, like huge person to play Wonder Woman, because there's a lot of people who want to see character designs, to at least to them anyways, better fit what they think that character should be. Getting out of comics for just half a second, Samus Aran is a really good example of this.
Mm-hmm.
When Samus was first created, she's supposed to be this jacked Gwendolyn Christie motherfucker, like huge, like really tall, muscular, kind of like Gwendolyn Christie meets like Ripley from Alien, like just fucking hardcore as shit. And now she's just like an anime waifu, and it's like, you know what I'm saying?
Oh, for sure. I feel like that is a big problem in terms of not only representation, but just like unique, iconic design, right? Like,
Yeah.
there's a reason why Mario would look strange if you gave him a six-pack. Like, characters have a range of body types because when you break down character design, you break down people, they are shapes, and shapes are a tool by artists to convey emotions and feelings. And yes, those can be given stereotypes as well, and harmful negative stereotypes, so avoid those. But they can also be used just to get cool silhouettes and more interesting and dynamic casts. It's where you get series where like every single character is drawn the exact same except for their face. You get like the problem, like the same face, especially with comic book females, is you'll see so many characters in like a lineup shot and they'll just look exactly the same. Like, some artists will draw Sue Storm and Captain Marvel stand right next to each other, and you cannot tell the difference aside from their costumes.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
which is like
And that's definitely
Sue Storm. She's meant to be. If anyone's gonna look like a model in DC, in Marvel, sorry, it's Sue Storm, because the Fantastic Four are meant to be celebrities. They're meant to be the people on all the magazine covers. They're the ones. Did you see the celebrity wedding of like the Marvel universe? It makes sense for that, right? Captain Marvel's a soldier, and soldiers can look like however various ranges of body types. But there's an easier justification for you giving her, all right, well, let's make this character look different, just because to vary things up and to represent different people a bit easier. And also, again, it's just, I imagine that's more fun for artists to draw if you have different characters and different things like that. It's one of those things where, as we keep moving forward in terms of character design and changing up body type, as well as changing up costumes and informing it from the movies, so sometimes we make it like match the actors and such like that. I wonder if we will get to a place, I hope so, we seem to be moving to a place where Wonder Woman isn't in a bathing suit anymore. She's in armor, as she should be. They've struggled for so many years to put pants on her, but they've never managed to make that work. Supergirl isn't wearing a crop top anymore. They still seem to be struggling with Power Girl, but at this point, it's almost iconic. And like at this point, it's like, yeah, that's the thing as well. It's like women with big boobs do exist. Like, fine, there's no problem with that. It's the problem becomes when every character looks like that, right? Because not every woman looks like that, and the same with every guy. Is you get a lineup shot of the Justice League. What you should be looking at is basically a lineup shot of the Olympics, where you look at an Olympic like lineup of people. Very range of body types, some different type of athletes with different type of sports. The only one I think is justified looking like the classic comic book superhero is really Batman, because Batman's meant to be the amalgam of every single thing possible. He's the best at. But like you said, Flash, sprinter body, give him huge quads if you want, but keep his arms small. I don't know. This is almost funny because it's body type, but it's also this is character design. Why do we keep making Cyborg more robotic?
Like to the point where I'm just like, he's got like half his face.
That's just
and then like his upper forearms. That's it. Like you can see parts of his bicep and like a fourth of his face. That's it. Just like, and I'll grant that like even Teen Titans, which is like a lot of people's like go to, like, oh, I love Cyborg and Teen Titans. That's still, that's all it is. It's just you can see his biceps and you can see a quarter of his face.
And that's, I think, one of those things that as we've, because his original look is pretty silly, and it shows way too much skin. But now we've reached the zenith of that, where you look at how he's been drawn in the comics now, where it's just his face. That is the only bit of skin on him, and it's kind of weird. And I don't want to call out anyone, but damn, the moment we wanted to put Cyborg on the Justice League team in our comic book, we really tried to hide the fact that he's black as much as possible, right? Not the best look there,
Ooh, spilling some tea.
Yeah, right, right? Like, it's one of those things where part of why the character is, he's meant to be a mix of human and technology and that conflict with him. You move that enough, you think. But also, like, if you're putting him on the Justice League and you're having this, with visibility for the characters, we're making sure that this fan favorite character has been given the shot at the big time. But we're also going to minimize him as much as possible in his design to remove any iconic elements, to where he's got like a C logo, but because every single bit on him is the same color, you can't even tell it's there. Sometimes it just looks like the rest of the line work. So Cyborgs, I think, is a good example of where we have streamlined him, yes, but we have over to the point where now he is just a shape silhouette, where he could just be any generic robot, basically. And that is such a shame for such an idea which has so much potential for how that could look, right? You see so many cool cyborgs in fiction. Like, there's a way to make that character look dynamic and visual. What I think I want to ask you as we kind of like wrap things up here is, are there any characters that stand up to you like at the moment that you think are in need of a redesign?
You know, it's funny. That was exactly what I was about to ask you. I think Cyborg is a really good example. Cyborg's not only a good example of that, but he's a good example of a character who you look at his first appearance and you're just like, oh yeah, that needs tweaking. So like Cyborg's just he's always had it rough in terms of getting a good design that sticks. In terms of characters who need a redesign right now, um, see, I'm struggling. I unfortunately just don't read as many comics as you guys. Um,
It could
in
apply
terms
to
of
other media as well. Like I'm thinking of stuff like I think what's a good example of it from outside of that? I think no, that's not good. I was about to say Link because I feel like Link. I was about to say Link just because they moved away from it, but like it doesn't. That's just the old design, and it works in Breath of the Wild. You're changing outfits anyway, so it doesn't really matter. But
yeah,
like there's characters like that. I feel comics wise though, I do think they haven't. They still need to work on Harley Quinn or bring back the old
yeah,
one.
for sure.
I think. I think character just from
Is Tim Drake still wearing that?
Tim
like,
Drake's
brown
still called
costume?
Drake. Yeah, he's still rocking that. I think.
Okay, well get rid of that shit.
Get rid of that shit. I'm trying to think of ones who haven't had a good costume but still have a bad one.
Oh.
So like the ones that I desperately need and like of just like this character still has yet to have that Nightwing moment of we figured it out.
Ooh.
I think one of the best ones is probably I don't think I've ever seen a good General Zod design.
Yeah.
I think General Zod's costume always either looks way too sleek and like it's just black and boring. It's just Superman's costume but black without the cape and it looks weird, or it's just armor to the nth degree. There's no middle ground, and I'm like, we need to find that middle ground.
Yeah, I agree with that for sure. I'm trying to think, man. Truth be told, I'm struggling. I'm not thinking of anyone off the top of my head really, because I'm going through like the Justice League lineup and things like that, and looking at like the current run up of the Justice League and what they all look like. I've been pretty dang happy with it lately. I mean, like, yeah, it kind of sucks that we went back. Like, we essentially had that really cool rebirth suit for Batman, and we just went back to his normal outfit. But you know, it's a classic suit, so it looks fine. I'm struggling to think of characters that I think need redesigned, at least in comics. I mean, there are certainly adaptations that are hot garbage that I can't wait till we move past. But I can't think of any characters off the top of my head that I think really need to be revamped. You know, even if I can kind of complain about how Samus looks when she's outside of her suit, her actual design for when she's in her costume and things like that all looks fantastic. So there are certain characters where like aspects of them I wish would be changed, but overall, you know, I still love the look and I still like how they look and things like that. So I'm struggling to think of any. This is hard without a third person to talk while I think of things.
Yeah, that's just why I'm here. You'll have to get used to the two people things, or we'll just have to bring in some special guest speakers. But it is. I think, to be honest, though, I think that does speak for itself, though, right? We've gotten to a good place now. I think if you were in the 90s and we asked this question on a fucking radio or something, right? It's like we would have pointed it out. I think in the age of the internet and comics being so much more widespread and having a bit more scrutiny, I think this gets caught a little bit more. Obviously, not to some degree. If we were still in the New 52, we could have had this conversation for longer. But I feel like Marvel and DC have gotten to a good place now where they're recognizing what works with characters, what characters can keep their modern looks, and what characters can change up. Like, I really like Wally West's current costume for the Flash. It's like a great mix of Kid Flash and modern Flash. So it's hard to think of characters like that need that update. What I've never been happy with the look, but this is also like it would be a wild interpretation of the character. It was like I think Penguin could probably do with a little look. Like I never found the Penguin really believable as like in any look. Like sometimes he looks too normal, and then sometimes he looks just like a monster, like Danny DeVito. Like I don't, I love you, Danny DeVito. Please don't sue us. But like there's never been a good balance with Penguin. So I think Penguin, I wouldn't mind seeing some of our artists take a crack at. And there's some villains that I think are probably the ones who take the short end of the stick because sometimes their designs that don't work, they normally aren't treated seriously enough to get thought about, oh, well, how could we make this work, right? Like, Riddler used to be that. Riddler in his jumpsuit used to just be, oh, this character's silly. The moment we put him in a suit and a bowler hat, people are like, oh, no, this guy can work.
Yeah, and I mean, sometimes some characters are just drawn in a weird way by a particular artist. Like I think in like one of the first issues of Scott Snyder's Batman run, I think we actually see Batman in Arkham and you see Riddler and he's got like his head shaved in a question mark. And I'm just like, well, that's fucking stupid. And I'm glad that didn't ever show up again. So like, cause then when you get to 0 Year and you're like, oh, thank Christ, Riddler doesn't look like that. So like sometimes an artist will just draw a character, either a villain or a side character in the story in kind of an odd way. And then it just, no, because like villains are kind of like that. Like there are a lot of villains that just bounce. I think one character who's a really good example of someone who we like find something that sticks for a couple years, and then we get tired of it and we move to something else. And personally, I'm still waiting for the one that grabs me the most is Deathstroke. Like Deathstroke's just like every other year, let's just do something new. And I'm just like, I'm so tired of it. Like I'm so tired of new Deathstroke costumes.
I'm just so tired of Deathstroke.
I mean, that's fair. But like Deathstroke's a good example of like every time I see the motherfucker, he looks different. And like I just like the iconic thing is his mask. Everything else, like we've had varying levels of armor. Like we've got like the Arkham Origins design, which was just the design that they used for the like the end of Justice League or BVS or whatever it was. And then you've got like the Slade design, and then you've got the more current design where it's more just like skin tight suit with like a couple pieces of armor. It's like they've never been able to find something that's really stuck for him. And I've not loved any of them really. And they just keep reinventing him in hopes that this will be the one that they figure it out. And there are some characters that feel like that. There's just constant reinvention upon reinvention until, I don't know, we figure it out.
And I think that's probably a good ending, the death of the conversation, the death of Deathstroke. Slade. Because I think that's a good symbolism of like, I don't think this is a problem that's ever going to get fixed. I don't think it's a problem that needs to be fixed or can be. It's just if people look at something for long enough, people are going to be a new person going to be like, well, why does it look like this? Like it's part of the creative flow to have ideas that people should try things. Like we've got the trunks now. I imagine one day they'll go away again, and then they'll come back again. It's kind of the nature of the beast. It's one of those things where because it's such an artistic medium. And this applies outside of comics. Just character design as a whole is rooted in just artistic sensibility. You can't get away from that. People have different tastes. It's subjective, and some people will think their favorite costume is something we think looks bad, or a character should look this way and shouldn't look like that, like body type wise as well. So it's gonna always happen. I just hope we can be smarter about it. And as long as we're having these conversations, as long as people are putting thought into it, and like, all right, I made this choice because this, and this. If you can give that reasoning, even if I think your design looks like hot garbage, at least you spent the time to justify it to at least yourself, right? I think like in the past, we have had character design changes where it's just been like, for the hell of it. I feel like stuff like Sonic Boom. Like, Sonic's got a neckerchief now. Why? So hopefully we'll be moving past that as we go on. But I guess now, though, I need to design a review topic.
Oh, snap.
Ooh, what am I going to do? Okay, how about this one? This one's kind of thing, but this could be nostalgic and fun. And I want to immediately, if Ian's listening to this, I want to immediately annoy him by doing weeb shit. I want to review the first arc of Naruto, the Zabuza arc.
I love the Zabuza arc.
I want to talk about that on Geeky Gentlemen and just weebify the channel.
My wife's gonna kill me for making her watch this.
Yes, good.
So we're talking like the full Zabuza arc.
I will send you just for the sake of being fair, so not making him watch 20 episodes straight. I have Naruto Kai, which is the cut, and it's still English dub and everything, but it just removes all the filler.
Oh, nice.
So I will send you that link. and just so people will know up front, it's like, well, they didn't talk about this thing that was bad. It was like, well, because we did the thing that sticks to the manga, boyos. Watch Naruto Kai, everyone. I'll have a link in the episode of that one as well or something. But yeah, we'll do that next week on Geeky Gentlemen. Until next time, I have been the champion of the oppressed.
I'm the Sonic erotica lover.